The grand hall of Silvermoon Palace glittered with gold and jewels. Hundreds of candles burned high in crystal chandeliers, their light dancing off marble floors and silk gowns. The air was heavy with perfume and pride, and Lyra Stormbane hated every breath of it. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, her hands clenched around the folds of a deep blue gown that felt more like a trap than clothing. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the tall mirrors that lined the walls, tall, strong, with shoulders too broad for the delicate lace she'd been forced to wear. A pale scar cut down her left cheek, sharp and bright under the candlelight. It was a mark of honor in her homeland, but here, among soft nobles and fake smiles, it was a reason for mockery. "They're staring again," her younger sister whispered beside her, nervously tugging at her own dress. "Just ignore them, Lyra." "I'm trying," Lyra said softly, jaw tight. "But I can smell their judgment." She wasn't wrong. Every whisper seemed to follow her like a curse. "That's her," someone murmured behind a fan. "The Wolf of the North, the girl who fights like a man. She doesn't belong here," another said, laughing. "Who would ever choose her?" Lyra forced herself not to react. Her father had begged her to come to this choosing ceremony, a tradition where noble alphas and ladies sought their fated mates, alliances sealed by the moon goddess. It was supposed to unite the realm. To her, it felt like a market for hearts. "I'd rather be fighting in the snow than drowning in perfume," she muttered. Her sister gave a nervous laugh. "You always say that. And I always mean it." Her gaze swept over the glittering crowd, young noblemen in gold-trimmed coats, women draped in jewels that sparkled like stars. They looked perfect, untouched by hardship. None of them had ever stood knee-deep in blood or frost. None had ever watched friends die at the border wars as she had. A cold voice broke through her thoughts. "Look who's trying to play lady tonight." Lyra turned to see Lady Serene, one of the Southern Court beauties, gliding toward her with a smile sharper than a dagger. Behind her, two other women giggled. "Serene," Lyra greeted flatly. Serene's gaze flicked to Lyra's scar. "Brave of you to show your face here. I suppose the moon goddess must enjoy a good laugh." One of her friends snorted. "Do you think anyone will choose her?" "Maybe one of the servants." Lyra's hands curled into fists. The urge to punch Serene's perfect teeth flashed through her like lightning, but she forced herself still. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "You are a Stormbane. We fight with honor, not anger." So instead, she smiled, slow, dangerous, and cold. "Careful, Lady Serene," she said softly. "If you keep talking, people might realize your perfume can't hide the rot underneath." The color drained from Serene's face. Her friends gasped. Lyra turned away before she could respond. She didn't need to fight. Her words had already hit like steel. Across the room, the Lord Regent, Duke Valmore, raised his goblet. "Let the choosing ceremony begin," he declared, his voice booming through the hall. The crowd erupted in cheers. Lyra stood still, every muscle tense. She didn't want to be chosen. She didn't want this life of false smiles and arranged destinies. But refusing would shame her family, and she'd done enough of that already. She whispered to herself, "Just get through tonight. Then you can go home." As she stepped forward into the line of noble daughters, the hall seemed to shrink around her. One by one, the men of power approached, offering smiles, compliments, and polished lies. None came near Lyra. None dared. Until her eyes caught a figure standing alone at the far end of the hall. He didn't wear silk or gold. His clothes were plain, dark leather armor, scuffed and worn from travel. His hair was black as night, his face lean, shadowed, and strong. He looked out of place among the glittering crowd, yet somehow more real than anyone there. And he was watching her. Not with pity. Not with disgust. Just watching. Lyra's breath caught. Something in his gaze cut through the noise, through the shame, through everything. It wasn't a courtier's empty look, it was the look of a warrior. A wolf who recognized another. He tilted his head slightly, almost like a silent question. For a heartbeat, the hall disappeared. The music dulled. The whispers faded. There was only her heartbeat and his eyes. Then, she did something no one expected. She stepped forward. Ignoring the gasps, ignoring her sister's panicked whisper, She crossed the ballroom floor toward the stranger in leather. He didn't move. He just watched her come closer, the corners of his mouth twitching, a flicker of surprise, and then respect. When she stopped in front of him, she felt every eye in the hall burning into her back. He bowed slightly. "My lady," he said quietly, his voice deep, rough, and steady like the sound of thunder before a storm. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, small and unreadable. "No one important." "Good," she said. "Then you won't mind when I do this." The Lord Regent began to speak, but Lyra's voice cut through the hall first, clear and strong. "I choose him." A stunned silence swept the room. Fans froze mid-wave. A noble dropped his goblet. Duke Valmer's smile faltered. The stranger blinked, as though her words had stunned even him. Then someone in the crowd laughed, high and cruel. "She's lost her mind. Choosing a beggar?" Whispers turned to outrage. "Disgraceful. A joke. She mocks the goddess." Lyra didn't flinch. She met the stranger's golden eyes, and in them, she saw something that made her forget the crowd entirely. He looked at her like she wasn't broken. Like she wasn't less. And in that moment, Lyra Stormbane, the scarred daughter of the North, chose not just a man, she chose herself. The night after the ceremony was restless and heavy. The palace had returned to silence, but one man did not sleep. Aaron, the man everyone thought was a nameless wanderer, stood on the balcony of a small guest chamber, watching the moon climb through a haze of mist. The mask of a soldier sat comfortably on his shoulders, but underneath, the weight of a crown pressed like a chain. He was the Alpha King, the most powerful shifter in the 7 territories. And tonight, he had been called a beggar. He almost smiled at the irony. The moonlight caught on the scar across his jaw, a scar he'd earned long before the crown. It reminded him who he really was beneath the gold, beneath the politics. The crown had made him a symbol, but symbols didn't bleed. Men did. And for the first time in years, he had felt alive, all because of a scarred, fierce-eyed woman who dared to choose him. He remembered the look on her face. Defiant. Beautiful. Real. Her voice echoed in his memory. "I choose him." He'd nearly forgotten what it was like to be seen, not as a king, not as a prize, but as a man. Behind him, his old friend and advisor, Rogan, stepped out of the shadows. "You shouldn't be here," Rogan said quietly. "If Valmore finds out you came to the choosing disguised." "He won't," Aaron said. "He's too busy planning his next move." Rogan's frown deepened. "You think the regent suspects something?" Aaron turned from the balcony. "I know he does. That man's ambition could drown the world." He began to pace. "Every year, this ceremony becomes more about power than the goddess. Valmore uses it to tighten his hold on the nobles. I wanted to see if there was still honor left in them." "And?" Rogan asked. Aaron's expression softened. "There is. In her." Rogan raised an eyebrow. "The northern girl?" "She has fire," Aaron said, almost to himself. "She looked at me like I wasn't a crown or a title. Just a man." Rogan crossed his arms. "You've gone sentimental, my king." "Maybe," Aaron admitted with a faint smile. "But tell me, when was the last time anyone looked at me without wanting something in return?" Rogan had no answer. Aaron sighed. "The nobles want my throne. The regent wants my death. And that woman, she just wanted the truth. She chose me, not knowing who I am. It's madness. It's dangerous," Rogan said firmly. "Her choice humiliated Valmore. He'll retaliate." "I know," Aaron murmured. "And she'll be the one to suffer for it." Silence fell between them. "Send someone to watch her house," Aaron said at last. Quietly. "If Valmore makes a move, I want to know before sunrise." Rogan hesitated. "And if she's targeted?" Aaron's jaw tightened. "Then the king will step out of the shadows." Meanwhile, in the northern guest quarters of the palace, Lyra couldn't sleep either. She sat by the window, staring at the distant snow-covered hills. The ceremony replayed over and over in her mind, the gasps, the laughter, her own voice ringing through the hall. She should have felt shame. But all she felt was strange, reckless calm. Her sister had cried after the ceremony, terrified of what the court would say. Her father had been silent, his disappointment a quiet blade. "What have I done?" Lyra whispered to herself. Then she remembered his eyes, that stranger's steady, golden gaze that had seen past her scars. And she whispered, "Something right." A soft knock startled her. "Lady Lyra," came a voice, a servant. A message arrived. She frowned. At this hour? The servant entered, pale-faced. "A royal seal, my lady. From the regent." Lyra's stomach twisted. She broke the seal. Her eyes scanned the words, and went cold. "By decree of His Grace, Duke Valmore, your father, Lord Stormbane, is summoned to the capital to answer charges of treason." "Treason," she whispered. Her sister gasped. "That's impossible." Lyra's hands shook. "He's no traitor." But even as she spoke, she knew the truth, this was revenge. Valmor's pride had been wounded before the entire court, and now he was striking back. "Get dressed," Lyra said suddenly. Her sister stared. "Where are we going?" "To stop this," Lyra said. "Before the serpent tightens its coil." Hours later, long before dawn, Valmor's guards marched through the fog-draped streets toward the Stormbane residence. The clatter of armor and hooves echoed like thunder. But in a nearby alley, a lone figure watched them approach, cloak pulled low, eyes gleaming gold under the hood. Aaron's voice was low as he spoke to himself. Too soon. He moves too soon. He could already see the storm about to break. Valmore wasn't just arresting a noble, he was baiting a trap. And the one who would bleed first was the woman who had dared to choose the wrong man. Rogan's warning whispered through his mind, "If she's targeted, what then?" Aaron's jaw set. "Then I stop pretending." The rain began to fall, cold and steady, as the first flames of treachery lit the northern sky. By morning, the rumors had already spread across every corridor of Silvermoon Palace. The northern girl chose a beggar, one noble whispered as servants carried trays through the great hall. "They say she defied the goddess herself," another replied. "And the Duke is furious. The Alpha King will hear of this." But the truth, like all dangerous things, had already taken root. And at the center of it was Lyra Stormbane. She stood in the courtyard of her family's guest estate, her hair unbraided, her sword strapped across her back despite the silken dress she still wore. The color had drained from her face, but not from her spirit. Her father, Lord Calder Stormbane, paced before her. The morning mist curled around his armor, his expression as heavy as the mountains of their homeland. "What you did last night," he said, voice low but trembling, "was reckless." "I know," Lyra replied quietly. "Reckless," he repeated, "and foolish." She clenched her jaw. "You asked me to attend the ceremony. You told me to stand with pride. I did that. By choosing a man no one knows," he thundered. "A man without name, without title. Do you realize what you've done?" Lyra met his eyes, her own burning. "I chose someone who looked at me like I wasn't a monster." Silence hit like a blow. Her younger sister, standing nearby, looked down at her feet. Lord Calder's expression softened, just for a heartbeat, before hardening again. "Lyra," he said, voice quieter now. "You are my daughter. You are a warrior. But the world does not forgive defiance, especially not from women who bear scars." "I don't need forgiveness," she said. "I need the truth." But the truth, she would soon learn, came wrapped in pain. A horn's blare split the air. Heavy boots echoed from the gates. The Stormbane guards tensed, their hands on their weapons. Her father's eyes snapped toward the sound. "That's not our patrol." The gates burst open. A troop of royal soldiers stormed in, armor glinting with the silver crest of the regent, the snarling serpent of House Valmore. At their head rode Captain Corrin, a grim man with eyes like black ice. "In the name of the regent," he called, unrolling a scroll, "Lord Calder Stormbane, you stand accused of treason against the crown." Lyra's stomach turned to stone. "What are you saying?" she demanded. The captain ignored her. "By the regent's command, you and your household are to be taken into custody." "This is madness," Lord Calder said, stepping forward. "I have served the crown for 30 years. Captain Corrin's voice did not waver. "The regent claims proof. Evidence that your daughter's actions at the choosing were part of a plot to disgrace the royal line." Lyra felt her blood freeze. That's a lie. Maybe, the captain said, his mouth twisting into something almost like pity. But it's written in ink and sealed with his signet. That makes it truth enough for now. The soldiers advanced. Her sister began to cry. Lyra moved on instinct, drawing her sword. No, her father barked. Stand down. Father. Stand down, he repeated. If you fight, they'll call it rebellion. Her grip trembled. Every muscle screamed to act. To fight. To do something. But she obeyed. They bound her father's wrists in chains of silver and led him toward the waiting carriages. He didn't look back, but his voice reached her as he passed. Survive, Lyra. That's all that matters now. When they were gone, the courtyard felt hollow. Empty. The silence louder than the soldiers' march. Her sister sobbed quietly. What do we do now? Lyra's hand tightened around the sword's hilt. The scent of rain and steel filled the air. We fight, she said softly. And we find the truth. Across the street, hidden beneath the shadow of a broken fountain, Aaron watched everything unfold. He had seen the soldiers arrive. He had heard the accusations. And though his face remained still, something dangerous burned behind his eyes. Valmore had moved faster than even he expected. Rogan, his advisor, stepped out of the mist beside him. It's begun, he said grimly. Yes, Aaron murmured. And it's my fault. Rogan frowned. Don't do that. I started this game, Aaron said. I wanted to see who still had honor in this court. I found one woman who did. And now, she's paying for it. He turned, watching as Lyra knelt beside the spot where her father had been taken, her head bowed, shoulders shaking but unbroken. She doesn't deserve this. Rogan sighed. You can't reveal yourself. Not yet. Valmore still holds the council, the armies, the city watch. I know, Aaron snapped. Then softer, I know. He looked up toward the palace spires. But if she runs, he'll send hunters. And if she stays, he'll burn her house to the ground. So what will you do? Rogan asked. Aaron's golden eyes hardened. What I should have done the moment I saw her. He stepped into the rain, disappearing into the city shadows. Protect her, he whispered, even if she never knows who I am. The storm came fast that night, thick rain falling like silver knives across the rooftops of the capital. Lyra moved through the alleys, cloak soaked, boots slipping on wet stone. Every street felt like a trap. The regent's guards were everywhere, their torches cutting lines of light through the dark. She had spent the day hiding what little she could, her father's old sword, her family's insignia ring, a few coins, before slipping away. Her sister had been sent north with loyal servants. Lyra alone had stayed behind to find proof of Valma's lies. She pressed her back to a wall, listening as two guards passed near the corner. Said the Duke wants her alive, one grumbled. Reckon he plans to make an example. The other snorted. He'll hang her before the moon rises. Lyra waited until their footsteps faded, then darted into the next alley. Rainwater streamed down her face. Every drop felt like fire. She was cold, hungry, and furious, but the anger kept her moving. Anger was easier than fear. Survive. That's all that matters now. Her father's words echoed again and again. Then a shadow moved across the mouth of the alley. Instinct screamed, she drew her sword and spun. A tall figure stepped forward, hooded, rain glinting off the steel at his belt. Stay back, she warned. I'm not afraid to fight. The man didn't move closer. You move quickly, he said, his voice low, calm, familiar. Lyra narrowed her eyes. You. He pushed back his hood. Golden eyes met hers through the rain. You should not be here, she said, lowering her sword slightly. If they find you. I know, he interrupted. But they're hunting you, not me. She laughed bitterly. That's supposed to make me feel better. He stepped closer now, slow and unthreatening. You're being framed, Lyra. Valmore wants your house destroyed to cover his own treachery. How do you know that? She demanded. Who are you, really? He hesitated. Someone who owes you a debt. I don't need debts, she snapped. I need proof. His jaw tightened. Then let me help you find it. She glared at him through the rain. Why? You don't even know me. He met her stare without flinching. Because you're the only person in that hall who didn't lie. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain was a wall between them, but the air was thick with something else, something dangerous. Lyra broke the silence first. If you want to help, stay out of my way. You'll be dead by morning if you keep moving like this, he said evenly. Valma's men have orders to capture or kill. I've survived worse. I don't doubt that, he said softly. But you're not fighting on a battlefield now. You're fighting in a pit of snakes. Her grip on her sword tightened. Then I'll learn to bite. He smiled faintly, almost despite himself. You really are a Stormbane. And you're really annoying, she muttered. He chuckled, just once, a quiet, rough sound that made her chest tighten for reasons she didn't want to name. She sighed. Fine. You can come. But the moment you slow me down, I leave you behind. Fair, he said. Where are we going? The archives, she said. Valmore keeps copies of royal decrees in the lower palace vault. If I can find the one with my father's seal, I can prove it's forged. Dangerous, he said approvingly. I like it. Of course you do, she muttered. You look like you collect danger for fun. His smile widened just slightly. You're not wrong. They slipped through the rain together, two shadows moving as one. The closer they got to the palace walls, the tighter the patrols became. Lyra led them through narrow backstreets and broken stairways that smelled of moss and smoke. Aaron followed in silence, his every movement precise, disciplined. She noticed how he kept his distance, how he scanned corners before she did. He moved like a soldier. No, like something more. They stopped beneath an old stone bridge overlooking the palace courtyard. Guards paced the outer gates, their armor glinting in the torchlight. We can't go through there, Lyra whispered. No, Aaron agreed. But there's an old drainage tunnel beneath the south wall. She turned to him sharply. How do you know that? He hesitated. Let's say I've been here before. Her eyes narrowed, but there was no time to question further. They moved fast, slipping down through a narrow passage half hidden behind ivy. The tunnel was slick and cold, the air thick with damp earth. When they finally emerged inside the lower chambers of the palace, Lyra exhaled softly. We're in. Stay close, he murmured. They crept through the dark corridors, avoiding torchlight and footsteps. Finally, they reached a heavy iron door marked with the royal seal. Lyra pressed her ear to it, nothing. She nodded. Help me. Aaron stepped forward and, with a single precise strike of his dagger, broke the latch. The lock gave way with barely a sound. Inside, rows of scrolls and ledgers stretched from floor to ceiling. Lyra hurried to the section marked Decrees of State. She scanned the shelves, pulling one parchment after another. Come on, she whispered. Where is it? Aaron stood guard by the door, listening for movement. Every sound in the distance set his nerves on edge. Finally, Lyra froze. Found it. She unrolled a scroll bearing her father's name and her blood ran cold. The writing was elegant but unfamiliar. The regent's seal glowed red at the bottom. But the accusation, treason, conspiracy, alliance with border rebels, it was all lies. Her voice shook. He forged it. The bastard forged it. Aaron crossed the room and looked over her shoulder. Then we have our proof. Before they could move, voices echoed from the hallway, the low clatter of boots, growing louder. Guards, he hissed. Lyra shoved the scroll into her cloak. We need to go. But the guards were already turning the corner. Aaron drew his sword, eyes blazing gold in the dark. Go, he said quietly. I'll hold them. Lyra grabbed his arm. No. We fight together. A fierce smile curved his mouth. Good answer. The door burst open. The first guard lunged. Aaron met him head-on, blade flashing silver. The second fell to Lyra's strike. The room erupted in chaos, steel against steel, shouts echoing through the corridor. She fought like the wolf they named her after, every movement raw and fast. When the last guard fell, the chamber was silent except for their ragged breathing. Lyra wiped blood from her cheek. You fight well, she said between breaths. He looked at her, his gaze unreadable. So do you. They stood there for a long, breathless moment, surrounded by fallen enemies, the rain still whispering through the cracks in the ceiling. Then Aaron said quietly, "We have to move before more come." Lyra nodded. "Where to?" He met her eyes, a flicker of something fierce and dangerous in his expression. "North. To your people. To your home." She hesitated. "You'd come with me?" His answer was simple. "Until the truth is free." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Inside, for the first time in her life, Lyra didn't feel alone. Dawn broke grey and heavy over the capital. The streets that once smelled of fresh bread and market spice now reeked of smoke and fear. Banners bearing Duke Valma's serpent crest hung from every tower, marking his dominion like a sickness spreading through the veins of the city. Lyra and Aaron slipped through the shadowed alleys, their cloaks damp with rain and the scent of danger clinging to them. Neither had slept. Every echo of a boot step sent Lyra's hand to her sword, every shout made Aaron's eyes narrow, calculating, and cold. "We can't stay here," Lyra said, scanning the empty market square ahead. "The guards will search every inn by noon." "They won't find us," Aaron said simply. She shot him a glance. "You sound sure." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Because they'll be searching for a frightened noble's daughter. Not a warrior covered in soot and mud." He had led them through the back streets before sunrise, his knowledge of the city's hidden paths uncanny. He always seemed to know where to turn, where the guards would patrol next. She hadn't asked how he knew, but part of her wanted to. They reached the edge of the city where the walls rose like cliffs of grey stone. Beyond them, the forest waited, a dark sea of green. Freedom and danger both lay that way. Aaron knelt near an old saw grate, prying it open with a blade. The metal groaned softly. "Down here." Lyra peered into the darkness. "You've done this before." He didn't look at her. "Once or twice." She hesitated, then followed him into the damp tunnel. The air was thick with the smell of earth and moss. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing softly. For a while, there was only the sound of their footsteps and their breathing. Finally, she spoke. "You fight like a man who's trained for years. Not a cell's word. Not a vagrant. Who taught you?" Aaron didn't answer at first. "An old ghost," he said finally. "Someone who taught me how to survive when truth was more dangerous than blades." "Then he taught you well," she said quietly. "You saved my life back there." He looked at her, his eyes catching the dim light. "You saved your own. I just kept up." They moved deeper through the tunnels until a faint light appeared ahead. Aaron pushed aside a metal grate, revealing the open countryside. The rain had stopped, but mist still clung to the ground like a shroud. Lyra climbed out first, breathing the wild air with relief. She turned to help him up, and for a heartbeat, their hands locked. His grip was strong, calloused, warm despite the cold. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding neither dared to name. He looked away first. "We need horses." Lyra exhaled slowly. "There's an old stable near the northern gate. My father used to keep war mounts there for the city patrol. If the guards haven't seized them yet." "Then we ride," Aaron finished. They made their way through the outer farmlands, crouching low as patrols moved along the roads. Once, a group of soldiers passed so close that Lyra could smell the oil on their armor. Aaron's hand brushed her arm, steadying her until they were gone. When they finally reached the stable, the sky was beginning to lighten. The door was half broken, the inside dark and quiet except for the soft snort of horses. Lyra smiled faintly. "Still here." She stepped toward the nearest stall and stroked a grey mare's neck. "Good girl." Aaron saddled a black stallion with practiced ease. His movements were quick, efficient, familiar. She caught herself watching him. "You handle horses like someone raised in the north," she said, adjusting her own reins. "I've traveled everywhere," he said. "The north taught me respect. The south taught me patience. And what did the capital teach you?" He paused. "That trust is rarer than gold." Lyra nodded slowly. "Then maybe we're both poor." They mounted their horses and rode out before the sun could expose them. Behind them, the city loomed, a beast of stone and secrets. Ahead, the wilderness stretched wide and unforgiving. The wind whipped through Lyra's hair as they rode north. For the first time in days, she felt something like freedom. Not safety, but purpose. Still, every mile they put between themselves and the capital felt like pulling at the threads of something vast and deadly. She could feel it, whatever game Duke Valmore was playing wasn't over. When night fell again, they made camp among the pines. A small fire flickered between them, barely enough to warm their hands. Aaron sat across from her, sharpening his blade. "When we reach your homeland, what will you do?" Lyra stared into the flames. "Rally my clan. Clear my father's name. And burn Valmor's lies to ash." "You sound certain." "I have to be," she said. "If I let doubt in, I'll fall apart." Aaron looked at her for a long time. "Doubt doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." She smirked. "Says the man who never hesitates." His eyes softened. "You'd be surprised." Silence stretched between them again, filled only by the crackle of fire and the whisper of wind. Lyra turned her gaze away, but her heart beat faster. She didn't know why this stranger, this mysterious, infuriating man, made her feel like the ground beneath her feet was shifting. And somewhere deep inside, Aaron was thinking the same. He'd fought wars and monsters, faced traitors and beasts. But he had never faced someone like her, a woman who made him remember what it meant to be alive. He lay awake long after she slept, staring into the stars. He could have left her behind. He should have. But his father's words haunted him. A king's heart is a luxury the kingdom cannot afford. He closed his eyes and whispered into the darkness, "Then maybe I'll stop being a king." The next days blurred into wind, rain, and endless green. The wilderness of the north was vast and merciless, filled with mist that swallowed the horizon and trees that whispered like ghosts. Lyra led the way most of the time, her instincts sharp, her movements sure. Aaron followed at her side, silent but alert, always scanning the shadows. By the third day, the ground turned rocky and steep. The mountains of her homeland loomed in the distance, dark against the morning sky. "We'll reach the border by nightfall," Lyra said, pulling her cloak tighter. "After that, it's my territory. The Duke's soldiers won't follow that far." Aaron gave a small nod. "They'll send hunters instead. Faster, quieter. Then we'll hunt them first." Her tone made him smile. "You really don't fear anything, do you?" She looked at him. "Fear keeps people alive. I just don't let it rule me." The path narrowed, forcing them close. At one point, Lyra stumbled on loose gravel, and his hand shot out to steady her. Their bodies brushed too close. "Careful," he said softly. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, though her pulse raced. They rode until dusk, when the forest opened to reveal a stream glittering beneath the fading light. They dismounted to rest. Lyra knelt to fill her flask while Aaron gathered wood for a fire. "You've been quiet," she said after a while. "Thinking," he admitted. "About what?" "About Valmore," he said. "He's too ambitious to settle for one house's destruction. This feels bigger." Lyra frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your father's arrest, the forged decree, it's part of something else. His moving pieces on a board we can't see yet." She stared at the water, her reflection rippling. "Then we'll find out what game he's playing. And we'll end it." Her certainty sparked something in him, a memory of his mother's voice, long ago, calling him my fearless wolf. He shook the thought away. When night fell, the stars stretched endless above them. They sat close to the fire, the silence no longer awkward but easy, almost warm. Lyra pulled her knees close, watching the flames. "When I was a girl," she said quietly, "they called me the Wolf Maiden. Said I was born under a hunter's moon. I thought it meant strength. But in the capital, they made it sound like a curse." Aaron turned his gaze to her. "Then they were fools. Wolves don't curse the moon. They answer it." She smiled faintly. "You always know what to say, don't you?" "Not always," he said, voice softer now. "Sometimes I say nothing, and hope the silence is enough." She met his eyes, her smile fading into something heavier, something fragile. "Why are you helping me?" He held her gaze. "Because once, I needed someone to believe in me. And no one did. I won't let that happen to you. The words hung in the air, honest and sharp. For a long while, neither moved. The fire cracked softly. Then Lyra said, I don't even know your name. He hesitated. Aaron. She repeated it quietly, as if testing how it felt. Aaron. He nodded. And you? Lyra. He smiled faintly. It suits you. How so? It sounds like thunder before a storm. The compliment startled her, made something warm flicker in her chest. She turned her face away, hiding the smile that wanted to rise. Later, when she finally fell asleep beside the fire, Aaron sat awake, his mind a storm. He knew he should leave her before the truth caught up with him. But when he looked at her, her face peaceful, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her sword, he knew he wouldn't. In the stillness of the wild, he made a silent vow, to protect her, no matter the cost. By morning, they were moving again. The northern wind cut through their cloaks, sharp and cold. From the ridges ahead, faint smoke curled into the sky, the first sign of her clan's stronghold. Lyra's heart quickened. We're almost home. But Aaron didn't answer. His instincts prickled. The smoke didn't rise like from cooking fires. It rose thick, black, and wild. Lyra saw it too. No. They urged their horses forward, racing through the last stretch of forest. When they broke from the trees, the sight froze them both. In the valley below, her fortress Ridgefall stood battered. The gate was closed, banners torn. The air smelled of blood and ash. Lyra's voice shook. What's happened? Aaron's jaw tightened. We're too late. But the fury that lit her eyes made even the storm seem small. Then we take it back, she said. All of it. Aaron looked at her, the wind tugging his cloak, and for the first time in years, he felt the pulse of something he had almost forgotten, hope. Because the warrior beside him wasn't broken. She was rising. And he knew, with every beat of his heart, that the world would never be the same after her. Smoke still hung thick over the valley when Lyra and Aaron reached Ridgefall. The air was sharp with ash, and the once green slopes around the fortress were trampled and blackened. The great wooden gates that had guarded her family for generations stood shut, iron-barred from the inside. Lyra's horse pawed the ground restlessly as she stared at the walls. Her throat felt tight. This isn't an attack, she whispered. It's fear. They've sealed themselves in. Aaron scanned the ramparts. They're expecting enemies. They're expecting me. Before she could move, a shout rang from above. Hold. A line of archers appeared on the wall, their bows drawn. Then a familiar voice called down. Who approaches Ridgefall? It's Lyra Stormbane, she shouted back. Daughter of Lord Calder. There was a long pause. The sound of creaking ropes echoed as the gate began to open. Aaron rode behind her as they entered. Inside the courtyard, the once bustling training grounds were filled with uneasy faces, warriors she had known since childhood, their armor scratched, their eyes suspicious. At the center of them stood Cale, her cousin, tall and broad-shouldered, his smile sharp as a blade. Well, the prodigal wolf returns, he said, arms open. Tell me, cousin, did you bring the king's wrath down upon us on purpose, or was that just your special talent? Lyra dismounted. Where's my father's command banner? Where's the council? Cale's grin vanished. The council waits in the hall. Come. Inside the fortress, the corridors were dim, lit only by flickering torches. The scent of smoke and fear clung to the stone. When they reached the great hall, Lyra's steps faltered. Her father's chair stood empty at the head of the table. Around it sat the remaining council members, grim and silent. Cale took the seat her father once occupied. The decree from the capital arrived 2 days ago, he said. Your father is branded a traitor. His title revoked. His lands claimed by the regent. The men are frightened, Lyra. They think following you might bring ruin. She stared at him. And what do you think? Cale leaned forward. I think you should surrender yourself. Go to the capital. Beg the regent's mercy. Maybe he'll spare the rest of us. A low, bitter laugh escaped her. You'd sell me to a snake because you're afraid. I'd sell anything to keep Ridgefall standing. The room went still. Then Aaron stepped forward from the shadows behind her. Fear never keeps walls standing, he said quietly. It just makes them crumble slower. All eyes turned to him. Kale sneered. And who's this? Your loyal stray? He's a warrior, Lyra said sharply. And the only man here who fought beside me when your precious regent tried to have me killed. Kale's hand slammed the table. You bring an outsider into our hall and speak of loyalty? Lyra met his glare. You can challenge me later. But right now, our people need a leader, not a coward who hides behind the regent's lies. A murmur rippled through the council. One of the older warriors, grey-haired and scarred, stood. The girl speaks truth, he said. She carries her father's fire. I'll follow her. Another rose. Then another. Kale's face darkened, but he didn't move. Lyra turned to the gathered warriors. Listen to me. Duke Valmore has twisted the crown's name. He's the true traitor. He means to destroy us one by one until no clan stands against him. If we bow now, we die as slaves. If we fight, we die as wolves. I know which death I'll choose. For a heartbeat, the hall was silent. Then the old warrior dropped to one knee. Alpha, he said. The word echoed like thunder. One by one, others followed. Lyra felt something shift deep inside her, power, old and wild, waking in her blood. Kale stood rigid, his eyes burning with resentment, but he did not kneel. You've made your choice, he said coldly. Don't expect me to save you from it. He turned and stalked out. When the doors closed behind him, Lyra exhaled slowly. Erin's gaze met hers across the room. For the first time, she saw something almost proud in his eyes. Later, when the others had left, she stood at the long table staring at the empty chair that once belonged to her father. Erin stepped up beside her. You led them well, he said. I spoke. They followed because they're desperate. They followed because they believe, he corrected. That's rarer. She looked at him then, and the anger, the fear, the exhaustion, it all caught up to her at once. I can't lose this place, she whispered. It's the only piece of him I have left. You won't lose it, Erin said. His voice was low, certain. Not while I still breathe. Something flickered between them again, an unspoken thread, fragile but real. For the first time in weeks, Lyra let herself breathe. 3 nights later, the mountains answered her call. Torches burned along the fortress walls, and the courtyard rang with steel as warriors prepared for war. A scout had returned at dusk with grim news. A company of royal soldiers was marching toward Ridgefall through the narrow pass of Fenmore, a place where cliffs rose like fangs and only one army could move through at a time. It's a test, Lyra said, standing over the map table in the war room. Valmore wants to see if we'll fight back. If we hesitate, he'll send an army next. Then we won't give him the chance, Erin said. He traced the map with a gloved finger, his brow furrowed in thought. The pass is narrow. We can strike from both sides before they reach the valley. Fast and quiet. End it before dawn. Kale's voice cut through the air from the corner of the room. You speak like a general. Strange knowledge for a nameless wanderer. Erin didn't look up. Stranger still that you'd rather question me than defend your home. Kale flushed. I'm only saying we shouldn't trust outsiders. Then stay behind, Erin said evenly. The wolves who still remember courage will come. Lyra slammed her dagger into the map. Enough. We ride in an hour. She turned to Erin. Prepare the men. He nodded once and left. Kale's glare followed him out, full of venom. When the war party gathered at the fortress gate, the moon was hidden behind clouds. 20 of her best warriors waited, faces painted in ash, weapons ready. Erin rode beside her, his black cloak blending into the dark. Once we're in position, we strike fast, Lyra told them. No mercy. No retreat. The wolves of Ridgefall answered with a low growl of agreement. They rode hard into the night. The forest closed around them, thick and silent except for the wind. When they reached the mouth of the pass, Erin signaled for them to dismount. The enemy was there, moving slowly through the narrow gorge, their torches flickering like dying stars. Lyra crouched behind a boulder, her hand on her sword. Wait for my mark. Her heart pounded as the soldiers came closer. She could see their faces now, hard, expressionless, the serpent crest gleaming on their armor. A flicker of doubt passed through her. These men think they're serving the king, she thought. But they serve a liar. She lifted her hand, then dropped it. Now. The night exploded. Wolves burst from the shadows, blades flashing, cries echoing off the cliffs. The royal soldiers reeled under the assault. Steel clashed, arrows whistled. The narrow pass turned into a storm of chaos. Lyra fought at the front, every strike precise, every motion born of rage and memory. She felt alive, terrifyingly alive. Aaron fought near her, his movements a blur of deadly grace. He moved like a man who had danced with death his entire life. When one of the soldiers lunged toward Lyra's blind side, Aaron was already there, his sword flashing. The man fell without a sound. "Behind you," she shouted, and together they turned, their blades moving in perfect rhythm. But something was wrong. These soldiers fought too well, too cleanly. They weren't ordinary guards. Their formation was too disciplined, their strikes too lethal. Then she saw it, the mark on their breastplates. Not the serpent crest of Valmore. The sigil of the royal assassins. "It's a trap," she shouted. Before she could move, one of the assassins lunged from her flank. His sword gleamed silver as it came down. She barely had time to react, then Aaron moved. He stepped between her and the blade. Steel met steel with a shriek, sparks scattering. His counterstrike was lightning fast, killing the attacker, but another blade came from behind, catching him across the arm. Blood darkened his sleeve, but he didn't stop. He drove forward, cutting down two more enemies with terrifying precision. Lyra watched in shock. No common soldier fought like that. His stance, his speed, every motion screamed training of the highest order. By the time the last assassin fell, the pass was silent again. The only sounds were their breathing and the whisper of wind over blood-stained stone. Lyra turned to him. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." She caught his wrist, pulling back the torn sleeve. The cut was deep. "That's not nothing." He met her eyes, and for a moment she forgot the battle, the blood, everything. His gaze was steady, but there was something behind it, a shadow of guilt. "Who are you, Aaron?" she asked softly. "No more riddles. No more half-truths." He looked away, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "I was a soldier once," he said. "Sworn to a lord who's long dead. I learned to fight so that others wouldn't have to." It was only half an answer, and she knew it. Lyra studied him, her heart still racing. The truth hovered just out of reach, but now was not the time to chase it. She turned toward the valley. "We need to go. Valmore won't stop here." Aaron nodded, though his thoughts were far away. He could feel the weight of his secret pressing heavier than his sword. She deserved to know who fought beside her, but telling her now would destroy the fragile unity she'd built. For now, the king would remain a shadow. As the first light of dawn touched the mountains, they rode back toward Ridgefall, the survivors silent, their faces grim. Behind them, the corpses of Valmor's assassins lay cooling on the stones, silent witnesses to a war that was only just beginning. Lyra glanced back once at the narrow pass, then forward to the rising sun. "He thinks fear will break us," she murmured. "But he's wrong." Aaron looked at her, blood still dripping from his arm, and said quietly, "Let him learn what wolves do when they're cornered." The wind carried their words away, but the promise remained. Together, they would bring the storm. Ridgefall stood restless under a bruised sky. Clouds gathered above the mountains like a warning, the air thick with the scent of coming rain. The fires in the fortress burned low, and tension hung over the warriors like a shroud. Lyra stood on the northern battlements, watching smoke still rise from the far edge of the valley where they had buried their dead. The victory in the pass had cost lives. She could still see their faces, men she'd trained beside since childhood, now gone. A soft step behind her broke her thoughts. "You should be resting," Aaron said. "I don't rest," she murmured, her gaze distant. "Not when my people are dying." He came to stand beside her, the wind tugging at his cloak. "They didn't die for nothing. You gave them back their pride." "Pride doesn't bury the fallen," she said bitterly. For a while, neither spoke. The thunder rolled far in the distance. Finally, Aaron said quietly, The assassins we faced, they were royal, not Valma's men. She turned to him sharply. What are you saying? I think Valma's reach goes deeper than we knew. If he commands the king's own elite, he's not just a regent playing politics, he's staging a coup. Lyra's heart tightened. He means to take the throne. Aaron nodded. And he's using your father's name as the spark to start his war. She looked out toward the misty peaks. Then we'll put out his fire before it spreads. He studied her for a long moment. You'd risk everything for a kingdom that exiled you. I'm not fighting for the crown, she said. I'm fighting for the truth. For my father. For the people who still believe in honor. There was a fierceness in her words that made his chest tighten. He'd met countless warriors in his life, but none with her kind of fire. You'll need allies, he said. The Stonefang clan controls the mountain passes to the west. If they join us, we can hold Ridgefall through the winter. Lyra frowned. Stonefang betrayed us once. They'll listen now, Aaron said. Valma's greed threatens them too. I can ride with you. She studied him. You always know the next move. Sometimes I wonder if you see the board long before the pieces move. He smiled faintly. Habit. From your old lord. From the life I left behind. Something in his tone made her want to press further, but the look in his eyes stopped her. There was a shadow there, a weight he carried alone. Then we leave at dawn, she said. I'll face the Stonefang myself. The journey west was rough and cold. The mountains clawed at the sky, their peaks lost in mist. Lyra and Aaron rode with a small escort of Ridgefall scouts, each step up the narrow mountain road echoing with distant thunder. When they reached the Stonefang stronghold, a fortress carved straight into the cliff, it was already night. Torches lined the walls, their flames trembling in the wind. At the gate, the guards barred their way until Lyra called out her name. After a tense moment, they were allowed entry. The hall inside was vast, the ceiling lost in shadow. Seated upon a throne of black stone was Alpha Vorin, the warlord of the Stonefang clan. His beard was silver, his eyes cold and sharp. Well, if it isn't the Wolf Maiden, he said as they approached. I heard you'd been branded traitor. Lyra kept her chin high. Only by liars. Vorin chuckled. You've always had a sharp tongue. Sit, then. Tell me why I should risk my clan for your cause. Lyra didn't sit. Because Valma's greed will not stop with the north. He'll take your lands next. He's already stolen the crown's armies. You'll bow to him eventually unless you stand with us now. Vorin leaned back, stroking his beard. Brave words. But what makes you think I'd trust a Stormbane again? Lyra's voice hardened. Because I'm not my father. And because you're no fool, Vorin. You know a viper when it coils near your throat. A murmur rippled through the hall. Vorin's smile faded. Aaron stepped forward. She speaks the truth. The regent's betrayal reaches even the royal guard. If you wait, he'll strike you next. Vorin's eyes narrowed at him. And who are you to speak of royal guards? Aaron's jaw tensed. A man who's seen what happens when the wrong hands grasp the throne. The old Alpha studied him for a long moment. Then he stood. Very well. I'll think on it. Stay the night. We'll speak again at dawn. Lyra inclined her head, but mistrust stirred in her gut. As they were led to their quarters, she whispered to Aaron, he's hiding something. I know, he said quietly. Keep your blade close tonight. That night, sleep refused to come. The mountain wind howled through the corridors, carrying the scent of smoke. Lyra sat by the narrow window, staring at the stars, uneasy. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Aaron was already awake, his hand on his sword. Then the door slammed open. A squad of armed men rushed in, weapons drawn. By order of Alpha Vorin, one barked. You're under arrest for conspiracy against the crown. Lyra's heart lurched. What? Aaron moved before she could finish. He slammed the door into the first attacker, blade flashing. Run, he shouted. She drew her sword, meeting the next soldier's strike head-on. The narrow chamber filled with chaos, steel clashing, shouts echoing. Aaron cut down two men, grabbed her wrist, and pulled her toward the window. Go. She hesitated. We're 3 floors up. Trust me. He kicked the shutters open. Below, a waterfall roared down into darkness. Lyra swore under her breath. You're insane. Probably, he said, and jumped. She followed a heartbeat later. The cold water hit like stone, knocking the breath from her lungs. She surfaced gasping, the current dragging her downstream. Aaron's arm caught her, pulling her toward the rocks at the edge. They crawled onto the bank, soaked and shivering, the night air biting their skin. Lyra coughed hard, then turned to him. So much for diplomacy. Aaron laughed hoarsely. You're welcome. She smacked his arm, half in anger, half in relief. You could have warned me. I did. You just didn't like the plan. Despite herself, she laughed too, a breathless, shaky sound that turned into a sigh. Vorin betrayed us. Or was paid to, Aaron said grimly. Valmore must have promised him something. Lyra clenched her fists. Then we'll make him regret believing a serpent. Lightning flashed in the distance, thunder rolling through the mountains. Aaron looked toward it and said quietly, the storm's coming sooner than we thought. By dawn, they had taken shelter in a ruined watchtower on the mountainside. Their clothes were still damp, their bodies bruised, but neither complained. Lyra had built a small fire from scraps of wood, and its weak light flickered against the stone walls. She sat wrapped in her cloak, her sword beside her. Aaron sat across from her, binding the gash on his arm with a strip of cloth. The wound had reopened during the fight. You're hurt again, she said, frowning. He glanced up. You're observant. Don't mock me. She reached for the cloth. Let me see. He hesitated but didn't pull away. She unwrapped the old bandage carefully, revealing the angry red line beneath. Her fingers brushed his skin warm despite the cold, and he went still. You should have let it heal, she murmured. He smiled faintly. Didn't have the luxury. She looked up at him, her expression softer now. You keep putting yourself in front of me. Why? Aaron's eyes met hers, gold catching the firelight. Because I'd rather bleed than watch you fall. For a moment, neither moved. The world outside faded, the wind, the storm, everything but that single heartbeat between them. Then Lyra drew her hand back, the spell breaking. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because I might start believing you. His smile flickered. Then believe me. But before she could answer, the sound of hooves echoed faintly from below. Both of them froze. Aaron stood, scanning the slope through the slit window. Riders. At least 10. Stonefang, she asked. He shook his head. No. Valma's colors. Lyra swore under her breath. They're hunting us. Aaron's jaw set. Then we give them a chase they'll regret. They left the tower at once, taking the narrow trail that wound deeper into the forested slope. The riders' voices grew louder behind them. Branches whipped past, the ground was slick with rain. Lyra's pulse hammered in her chest. Every instinct screamed to fight, but Aaron kept pulling her forward. Not here, he said. They have the high ground. They ran until the trees opened into a clearing by a frozen river. The riders emerged seconds later, surrounding them in a semicircle. Drop your weapons, their leader shouted. By order of the regent. Lyra raised her chin. Tell your regent his order means nothing in the north. The leader sneered. Then die with your pride, traitor. He spurred his horse forward. Aaron moved like lightning. One moment he stood beside her, the next, he was on the attack, striking with brutal precision. His sword caught the rider's blade, turned it aside, and in a single motion, disarmed and threw him from the saddle. Lyra joined the fray, her movements fast and fierce. The battle was chaos, steel, shouting, the crash of hooves. Aaron's fighting style was unlike anything she'd ever seen, disciplined, almost regal. He moved with purpose, not desperation. When the last of the riders fell or fled, the clearing was silent again, littered with bodies. Lyra turned to him, chest heaving. You could have killed them all faster. He wiped his blade clean. I was trying not to. Why spare them? Because the truth spreads faster through survivors. She stared at him, half in awe, half in confusion. You think like a king, she said. He froze. but she didn't notice she was already turning away. Come on. We'll head east for now. Valmore will tighten his grip on the mountains. As they mounted the horses, Erin's thoughts churned. She was getting closer to the truth. Sooner or later, she'd realize who he truly was. But for now, he looked at her riding ahead, hair wild in the wind, eyes fierce with purpose, and he couldn't bring himself to end the lie. When the rain finally began to fall again, she slowed her horse and looked back at him. You said once that doubt makes us human, she said. You were right. But sometimes, I think doubt also makes us dangerous. He met her gaze, rain dripping down his face. Then maybe it's time we became very dangerous. And with that, they rode on, two fugitives bound by truth, lies, and something that neither of them dared to name yet. Behind them, thunder rolled again, the sound of a kingdom trembling before the storm that was coming. The storm broke the next night. Wind howled through the canyons as Lyra and Erin rode eastward beneath a bruised sky. Rain lashed their faces, turning the narrow trail into a river of mud. They hadn't eaten since dawn, and the horses were near exhaustion, but neither slowed. Behind them, Valma's forces were closing in like a shadow that wouldn't fade. We'll reach the ravine by sunrise, Erin called over the roar of the rain. There's shelter there. Lyra nodded, barely able to hear him. The cold cut to her bones, but the fire inside her burned hotter. Every breath reminded her of what they'd lost, her father's name, her clan's peace, the quiet life that had once been theirs. Valmore had taken everything, and she would make him choke on it. When they finally found the ravine, it was hidden between two cliffs, a jagged scar in the mountain. They dismounted and led the horses into the hollow beneath a jut of rock. The rain softened to a steady hiss. Erin built a fire from damp wood and flint. It smoked, stubbornly, until finally it caught. Lyra crouched close to it, rubbing her arms to bring back warmth. He watched her quietly from across the flames, his golden eyes half-lidded, the light flickering on his face. For the first time since they'd met, he looked tired, not physically, but in a deeper, older way. You should sleep, she said softly. You haven't closed your eyes in 2 days. Neither have you. Stubbornness isn't a contest, Erin. He smiled faintly. If it were, you'd win. She chuckled, but the sound faded when she caught the shadow behind his smile. What is it? He hesitated. Nothing that can be fixed tonight. Try me. His gaze dropped to the fire. When I was a boy, I believed the crown stood for justice. That every oath sworn beneath the moon meant something. But the older I got, the more I saw what power does to men. It eats them from the inside. Lyra studied him. And you? Has it eaten you too? His eyes lifted to hers. Not yet. The words hung between them, heavy and quiet. Then, somewhere beyond the storm, a branch snapped. Erin's head jerked up. Down, he whispered. Lyra dropped behind a rock just as an arrow hissed through the air, embedding itself in the ground where she'd been sitting. Another followed, and another. The fire sputtered as shadows moved in the trees. Ambush, Erin shouted, drawing his sword. Figures in black cloaks emerged from the rain, blades glinting. Lyra's heart hammered. Valma's men? Not his, Erin said grimly, blocking a strike. Assassins again. The fight was chaos. The narrow space of the ravine turned every movement into struggle, steel clashing, rain turning the ground slick beneath their boots. Lyra moved like lightning, parrying one blow, spinning to strike another. But there were too many. Erin cut down two, but an arrow flew out of the darkness, finding its mark in his shoulder. He stumbled, the force of it driving him to one knee. Erin! Lyra shouted. He gritted his teeth and ripped the arrow out, blood running down his arm. Keep fighting. But she saw the color draining from his face, the arrow's tip had been blackened. Poison. Something inside her snapped. She turned with a snarl, meeting the next assassin's blade and breaking it clean in half with her strike. She fought with fury, her movements no longer controlled but primal, a storm given shape. One after another, her enemies fell until silence reclaimed the ravine. The rain poured harder. Lyra dropped to her knees beside Erin. His skin was pale, his breath shallow. No, 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 she pressed her hand to the wound, but the blood wouldn't stop. "You're not dying here, you stubborn fool." He tried to smile, but his lips were blue. "I told you not to get too close." "Shut up," she said, voice shaking. "You don't get to talk." His hand rose weakly, catching hers. "Lyra. Don't you dare," she said fiercely. "You're not allowed to say goodbye." "Wasn't going to," he murmured. "Just don't let them win." "Then you stay with me," she said. "That's an order." She tore a strip of cloth from her cloak and pressed it against the wound, her hands slick with his blood. His pulse fluttered beneath her fingers. She looked around desperately, rain, mud, stone. No herbs, no medicine. Nothing. Her breath came in ragged bursts. "Come on, Aaron. Wake up." He didn't answer. His head lolled back, his eyes half closed. For a moment, she thought she'd lost him. Then she remembered something, an old northern remedy, one her father had used on wounded soldiers. She grabbed her dagger and cut open the poisoned flesh, pressing until the darkened blood welled up. Aaron groaned in pain, but it was a sound she clung to like life itself. "Stay awake," she whispered. "I'm not letting you go." When the bleeding slowed, she bound the wound as tightly as she could and dragged him closer to the fire. His body was cold, but his breathing steadied slightly. She stayed awake the whole night, feeding the flames and whispering to the man who had saved her more times than she could count. "You think you're some lone wolf," she said softly, her fingers brushing his hair back from his face. "But you're not. You're mine now, Aaron. You're my fight." Outside, the storm raged. Inside, she held him through the night until the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. Aaron woke to the sound of crackling fire and the steady rhythm of rain. His shoulder burned, his throat was dry, and his head throbbed. For a moment, he didn't know where he was, then he saw her. Lyra sat a few feet away, her cloak wrapped around her shoulders, eyes heavy with exhaustion. When she realized he was awake, she let out a shaky breath. "About time," she said. "You sleep like the dead." He tried to sit up, winced, and fell back. "What happened?" "You got yourself poisoned," she said. "Again." He looked at the bandages on his shoulder. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed," she snapped. "You think I'd just leave you here to die?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Wouldn't have blamed you." "Well, I would've," she said. "And I'm not good at forgiving." Something in her voice made him look at her differently. There was steel in her words, but beneath it, something raw and trembling. For all her strength, Lyra Stormbane cared more than she wanted to admit. "How long was I out?" he asked. 2 days, she said. "I thought you weren't going to wake up." He looked toward the ravine's mouth, where mist drifted over the stones. "And Valma's men?" "Gone. I think they thought we were dead." He exhaled. "Good." For a long time, they said nothing. The fire crackled softly. Lyra broke the silence first. "You owe me answers, Aaron. Real ones this time." He met her gaze. "What do you want to know?" "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "Truly." A long silence followed. He looked down at his hands, flexing them as if the truth itself weighed too much to hold. "If I tell you, everything changes." "Then change it," she said. "I'm done fighting beside a ghost." He drew a slow breath. "My name is Aaron Fenrir, son of Erindor, heir to the 7 territories. The Alpha King." The world seemed to stop. The wind outside stilled. Even the fire's crackle felt distant. Lyra stared at him, unblinking. "You're lying." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was in his eyes, the calm, the weight, the quiet authority that had always surrounded him like an invisible crown. She stood abruptly, anger and disbelief twisting in her chest. "You let me think you were some wandering soldier while my people bled for your throne. I didn't want you to bleed for me," he said, his voice steady. "I wanted to see who still had honor left in this realm. Who would fight for truth, not for power." "You used me," she hissed. "No," he said softly. "I chose you." The words hit her harder than a blow. She wanted to scream, to curse him, to call him every name she could think of, but her heart betrayed her. Because deep down, she already knew. She'd known since that night at the ceremony. Since the moment she'd looked into those golden eyes and seen something more than a soldier. "Why tell me now?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Because I'm done lying," he said. "And because you deserve the truth before you decide whether to hate me." She turned away, her hands trembling. "You should have told me sooner." "I couldn't," he said quietly. "Valmore controls half the court. If word spread that I was still alive, he'd have raised Ridgefall before I could act." Lyra swallowed hard. "And what now? You expect me to kneel? To serve your crown?" "No," he said, standing slowly despite the pain. "I expect you to stand beside me." She spun to face him. "After everything?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because you're the only one I trust to help me save this kingdom." The sincerity in his voice shattered something in her. All her anger, all her fear, tangled with something she didn't want to name. "Your people need you," she said. "Not me." He took a step closer. "They need us both." Her breath caught. The firelight painted his face in gold and shadow. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she looked away, whispering, "You're still impossible. And you're still fearless," he said with a smile. She exhaled shakily. "If we do this, we do it my way. Ridgefall stands with me, not beneath you." "Then that's how it will be," he said. "You're not my subject, Lyra. You're my equal." The storm outside had quieted, but another kind of storm had begun between them, one made of trust and something far deeper. Lyra's voice softened. "When do we start?" He met her gaze. "At dawn. Valma's army marches toward the capital. We'll meet them halfway." She nodded, the firelight glinting in her eyes. "Then let him come. The serpent wanted war. Now he'll have it." That night, as the rain finally faded to mist, Erin lay awake, watching the fire's glow fade. Lyra slept beside it, her hand resting lightly on her sword. He reached up, touching the crown-shaped scar that marked his wrist, a memory of the coronation he'd once hated. "Maybe this time," he whispered, "I'll earn it." And for the first time in years, he believed he could. Dawn came pale and cold, spilling over the cliffs like molten silver. Ridgefall was alive with motion. Horns echoed across the valley, summoning every warrior, scout, and smith. Fires burned in the courtyards, sparks rising into the mist. The fortress that had once felt broken now roared with purpose. At the center of it all stood Lyra Stormbane, armor strapped tight, cloak sweeping behind her, hair bound in a warrior's braid. The wolf sigil of her clan gleamed across her chest. Around her, her people gathered in lines, ready for war. Erin stood beside her, freshly dressed in the black and gold of the Alpha King. His wound had mostly healed, but the weight of revelation still lingered between them. Where once there had been secrecy, now there was truth and the uneasy bond that truth had forged. Lyra felt their eyes on him, the warriors who had known him only as her companion now seeing him as the king. Some bowed, some stared. She could feel the shift, the uncertainty crawling through the air. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "You all know the man who stands beside me," she said. "He fought with us in the mud, bled beside us in the rain, and faced Valma's assassins when no one else would. Now you know his name, Erin Fenrir, your rightful king." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lyra's gaze swept over them. "I don't care for crowns or titles. I care for truth. And this man has earned the right to stand with us, not above us. Together, we will end Valma's lies and take back what was stolen." A pause. Then one of the warriors, an older man, his voice gravelly, stepped forward. "If you stand with him, Lyra Stormbane, then we will too." A howl broke from the ranks, echoed by dozens more. The sound rose like thunder through the mountains, wolves answering their alpha's call. Erin looked at her, something fierce and proud in his eyes. "You command loyalty better than any crown ever could." She smirked. "You should take notes, Your Majesty." They spent the rest of the morning preparing for battle. The blacksmiths forged blades and arrowheads, scouts mapped the terrain between Ridgefall and the capital. The plan was clear: they would march south, rallying the loyal clans along the way, and face Valma's forces at the plains of North, a place where kingdoms were made or broken. Lyra stood with Erin in the war room, tracing their route across the map. "If we move fast, We can reach North in 3 days. Any longer, and Valmore will entrench. Erin nodded, studying her. You've fought more battles than most generals. She shrugged. War teaches quickly. He leaned closer. And what has it taught you? That mercy is a luxury. And trust is rarer than steel. He smiled faintly. Then maybe we're both running out of luxuries. Before she could reply, a scout burst through the door. Your Majesties, the Duke's messenger has arrived. Lyra's head snapped up. Messenger? The scout nodded, breathless. He carries a white flag. Moments later, the great hall filled with tension. The messenger knelt before them, his robes soaked with travel. By decree of Duke Valmore, he said, voice trembling, a parley is offered before the bloodshed begins. Lyra crossed her arms. A parley with a serpent? No. Erin's gaze darkened. He wants to buy time. Or learn our position. The messenger looked between them nervously. The Duke claims he wishes peace. Lyra stepped forward, her boots striking the stone. Tell your master peace died when he chained my father. The messenger flinched. He says the Alpha King should surrender. If you do, he'll spare the northern clans. Erin's voice dropped low, like distant thunder. Spare them? He's already killed hundreds. Lyra's hand went to her sword. Take this message back to your duke, she said coldly. Tell him the wolves of the north do not kneel. The messenger fled, stumbling out into the storm. Erin watched him go, then turned to her. You realize what you've just done? She met his gaze without fear. Started a war. Good. I was tired of waiting. He almost smiled. You truly are unstoppable. Don't flatter me, she said. You'll regret it when I win. That night, Ridgefall burned with preparation. Drums echoed through the halls. Armor gleamed beneath torchlight. In her chamber, Lyra stood before the mirror, fastening her gauntlets. Her reflection looked back at her, not the scarred outcast from the ceremony, but a warrior queen in her own right. Erin appeared in the doorway. You're ready. Are you? He stepped closer, his eyes tracing her face, the line of her scar, the fire in her eyes. For this war? Or for you? She looked away. Both, I hope. He reached out, brushing his fingers against her hand. You've already won one of them. Her breath caught. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she stepped back, forcing a smile. Save your charm for the battlefield. Erin laughed quietly. You think that's where I'm charming? Shut up, King. The army left Ridgefall at dawn. Banners of black and silver fluttered in the wind, the sigil of the wolf carried proudly beside the royal crest. Snow still clung to the higher peaks, but the air was heavy with the scent of spring and iron, a season for war. Lyra rode at the front, her cloak whipping behind her. Erin rode beside her, the sun glinting off his armor. Behind them, an army of thousands marched, warriors of the north, hunters, archers, and soldiers from villages long oppressed by Valmor's rule. By the second day, they reached the edge of the North Plains. The land stretched flat and endless, golden grass waving beneath a pale sky. Across the horizon, smoke rose from enemy encampments, Valmor's forces, already waiting. They stopped at a ridge overlooking the field. Lyra's jaw tightened as she saw the rows of crimson tents and banners bearing the serpent's crest. He's ready. Erin studied the formation. Too ready. He wants us to strike first. Lyra turned to him. Then let him think we will. That evening, they sent out scouts and began building fortifications. As the sun dipped low, a lone rider approached from Valmor's camp, carrying a black banner of challenge. He stopped before their lines and shouted, by decree of Duke Valmore, the false Alpha King is called to single combat. Trial by blood, to decide who rules the realm. The words carried across the plains like thunder. Lyra's stomach turned. He wants a duel. He's forcing the old law. Erin's expression was unreadable. He's desperate. If he kills me in a duel, the crown is his by ancient right. Then we refuse, she said. It's a trap. He looked at her, calm and resolute. Refusing would brand me a coward. And our people would lose faith. Erin. He reached out, cupping her face gently. This is the way it has to be. Her throat tightened. He'll cheat. Then I'll cheat better. She wanted to argue, to scream, but his eyes silenced her. There was something in them, determination, yes, but also peace, as if he'd made his choice long before. Let me fight, she said suddenly. You don't need to prove anything. He smiled faintly. You've already proven enough for both of us. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The two armies gathered on the plains, forming a vast circle around the dueling ground. The air was thick with silence. Valmore emerged from his ranks clad in red and gold, his armor polished, his smile sharp. He bowed mockingly to Aaron. Your Majesty. How kind of you to crawl from your hole. Aaron drew his sword, its edge gleaming like moonlight. Crawl? No. I rise. Valmor's smirk faltered, but only for a second. You've always been stubborn, Fenrir. Too soft for the crown. That's why it should have been mine. Then prove it, Aaron said. The duel began. They circled each other, two wolves testing the air before the kill. Then steel clashed. Sparks flew with every strike. Aaron's movements were fluid, controlled, Valmor's were vicious and wild. Lyra stood at the edge of the circle, her heart pounding with every blow. She'd seen Aaron fight before, but never like this. Every motion carried purpose. Every strike was the weight of his kingdom, his guilt, his love. Valmore slashed low, cutting Aaron's leg. Blood sprayed, but Aaron didn't fall. He countered, driving Valmore back step by step. The serpent stumbled, his arrogance cracking. The crowd roared as the two blades locked again. Valmore sneered. You think your wolves will save you? You're alone, king. Aaron's voice was steady. No. I never was. Then, with a burst of strength, he broke the lock, spinning his blade in a flash of silver. The next moment, Valmor's sword clattered to the ground. Aaron's blade rested at his throat. The field went silent. Valmor's lips trembled. Mercy. Mercy. Aaron's voice was ice. For the man who murdered my guards, poisoned my council, and framed the North. The man who caged a father to break a daughter. Valmor's eyes widened. You can't. Aaron's sword came down. One strike. One clean end. The serpent's head fell, and the plains erupted in thunderous howls. The war was over before it began. Aaron turned toward Lyra. Blood stained his armor, his face pale but unbroken. He sheathed his sword and walked to her through the roar of his army. She met him halfway. You did it, she whispered. We did it, he said. Around them, soldiers knelt, cheering their king. But Aaron's eyes were only on her. There's one more thing left to do. He sank to one knee not as a king before a queen, but as a man before the only person who had ever made him feel whole. Lyra Stormbane, he said, his voice carrying across the plains, you stood beside me when the world called me nothing. You saw the man behind the crown. Be my equal in this reign. Be my queen. The wind stilled. The crowd held its breath. Lyra's eyes shimmered, not with tears but with pride. She reached down, took his hand, and lifted him to his feet. No crown, she said. Not for me. Then no crown, he answered. Only the bond of wolves. The soldiers howled once more, the sound rolling over the plains like thunder. And as the sun broke through the clouds, Aaron and Lyra stood together, king and warrior, equals, bound not by law or blood, but by fire and the promise of a new dawn. The morning after the duel dawned blood-red. A storm of crows circled above the plains where Valmor's body had been burned. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath, quiet, heavy, waiting. Aaron stood alone before the battlefield, the wind tugging at his cloak. The weight of victory pressed down on his shoulders like a second crown. The serpent was dead, but peace was not yet born. Around him, his soldiers moved slowly, collecting the fallen, tending to the wounded. Lyra watched from a short distance, her armor still stained with dirt and blood. She had not slept. The duel's echoes still rang in her mind, the sound of clashing steel, the moment Aaron's blade had fallen, and the silence that followed. She had seen men die before, but this death had changed the course of a kingdom. When she approached, Aaron turned. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, but when he saw her, something softer flickered through the exhaustion. It's over, she said quietly. For them, he replied. But not for us. She frowned. You mean the crown? I mean the council, he said, voice low. They'll resist me. They'll call me a pretender for disappearing. Valma's poison runs deep. Killing him was the easy part. Lyra crossed her arms. Then let them come. You've got the wolves now. Aaron smiled faintly. That I do. He looked past her to the distant hills where Ridgefall's banners fluttered in the wind. Do you remember the first time you saw me? Lyra snorted. You mean when I chose you in front of half the nobles and made them choke on their laughter? Exactly, he said. You were fearless then. You still are. She tilted her head. You were quieter back then. I was hiding, he admitted. You made me want to stop. The air between them grew still. For a heartbeat, the world was only the two of them, the wind, the smell of rain, the memory of battle still clinging to their skin. But before the moment could deepen, a scout approached, breathless. Your Majesty, a rider approaches from the capital. He bears the seal of the royal court. Aaron straightened, his jaw tightening. Let him through. Moments later, a dust-covered rider galloped into camp and dismounted. He knelt quickly. My king, he said, the council calls for your return. The throne awaits your judgment. But there's unrest. Supporters of the late duke have barricaded the palace. They're demanding proof that you live. Aaron nodded slowly. Then they shall have it. Lyra stepped closer. You can't just ride in. It's a trap. I know, he said. That's why I won't go alone. Her eyes widened. You mean? Yes. You'll ride with me. Lyra's heart stuttered, though she masked it with a smirk. The king and his wolf. He smiled. The world's already heard the stories. Let's give them truth instead. 2 days later, they rode toward the capital under a sky of fading grey. Word of Valma's death had spread faster than fire. Villagers lined the roads, kneeling as they passed, calling out blessings to the king returned. But the city was another matter. When they reached the gates, the air was thick with tension. The serpent banners had been torn down, but unrest simmered beneath the surface. Armed guards lined the streets, their faces grim. At the palace, the main courtyard was packed with soldiers and citizens alike. The council stood on the high steps, robed in finery that no longer inspired awe. At their head was Chancellor Dareth, a narrow-eyed man who had once sworn loyalty to Aaron but had profited from his disappearance. The Chancellor stepped forward, voice dripping false reverence. My king. We feared you lost. Only misplaced, Aaron said. It seems my absence gave serpents time to grow. Dareth's smile flickered. You have returned at last to reclaim your throne, but questions remain. Without witnesses, how can the people know you are who you claim? Lyra's hand tightened on her sword. You dare question him? The Chancellor sneered. And who are you to speak in the king's court? Aaron's voice cut through the air, calm but lethal. She is Lyra Stormbane, savior of the North and my chosen champion. Insult her again, and you'll regret remembering your tongue. The crowd stirred, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Dareth paled but forced a brittle smile. Then let the king prove his claim. As law demands, we call for the trial of kings, the duel by blood. Lyra's stomach twisted. Another duel? Aaron didn't flinch. Accepted. The Chancellor smirked, triumphant. Then prepare, Your Majesty. Your opponent will be chosen by the council, one who bears the serpent's legacy. A tall figure stepped forward from the ranks of guards, armor polished black, a serpent sigil carved into his chest plate. He removed his helm, revealing cold grey eyes. My name is Sir Carith Valmore, he said. Brother to the Duke you murdered. Lyra stepped toward him. He killed your brother because your brother betrayed the crown. Carith's gaze shifted to her, burning with hatred. Then you can die beside him. Aaron's hand brushed her arm gently. No, he said. This is mine. The trial of kings took place that afternoon. The courtyard was cleared, the ground marked in a wide circle. The people crowded the balconies above, every eye fixed on the two figures at its center. Aaron stood in simple armor, his crown resting on the steps behind him. Across from him, Kareth gripped a jagged great sword, its blade etched with poison-black runes. A priest stepped forward. By the blood of kings, let the truth be tested. Let the goddess witness. The duel began. Kareth struck first, fast, brutal. His strength was monstrous, fueled by rage. Aaron barely parried in time, the impact ringing through his arms. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Lyra watched from the edge, her breath shallow. Every strike felt like thunder, every dodge like lightning. Aaron's movements were slower than usual, he was still recovering from his wound, but his eyes never left his opponent. Kareth drove him back, slashing again and again, until Aaron stumbled. The crowd gasped. The Chancellor leaned forward with a serpent's smile. The pretender falls. Lyra's hands clenched at her sides. Get up, she whispered. Kareth raised his sword for the killing blow. Aaron's voice cut through the air. For the north. Then he moved, faster than anyone thought possible. He ducked under the strike, twisted, and drove his blade upward. The steel punched through Kareth's chest. The man gasped, his sword clattering from his hands. For the crown, Aaron finished, and pulled his blade free. Kareth fell, and the crowd erupted. Cheers roared across the courtyard, echoing off stone. The king lives. The Alpha King lives. Aaron stood panting, his blade dripping crimson. The priest knelt. The goddess has witnessed. The throne is yours, my king. Lyra exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Aaron looked at her, eyes bright but weary. It's done. Not yet, she said. Now you must rule. He smiled faintly. I'd rather fight 10 more duels than sit on that throne. Too bad, she said, smirking. You're stuck with it. That evening, the palace blazed with light. For the first time in years, the halls echoed not with fear but with song. The banners of the serpent were gone, replaced by the wolf and crown intertwined. A feast had been prepared, though most of the nobles still kept their distance from the woman who walked at the king's side. Lyra didn't care. She had never belonged to courts or silks. Her place was beside the man who had bled for his people. Aaron stood before the throne, holding the royal scepter, its gold gleaming in the firelight. But he did not sit. This seat, he said to the gathered court, has been empty too long. It is not a symbol of power, but of duty. And I will not bear it alone. The nobles murmured, confused. He turned to Lyra. Step forward. She blinked. Aaron. He silenced her with a look. You carried me through the shadows. You gave me back my kingdom. You are as much the crown as I am. Stand with me. Gasps rippled through the court as he knelt before her, placing the scepter between them. Lyra's voice was low, trembling but strong. I never wanted a throne. Then don't take one, he said. Take a promise. The hall fell silent. The only sound was the crackle of the great fire. Lyra hesitated, then reached down and took his hand, lifting him up. Fine, she said. But only if we rule as wolves side by side, not one above the other. Aaron smiled, a true smile this time. As it should be. The court erupted in applause and shouts, though many of the nobles did not understand the weight of what they had witnessed. When the cheering faded, Aaron turned to the crowd. From this day, the crown will remember the North not as a land of rebels, but as its heart. The days of serpents are over. The wolves rise. The roar that followed shook the hall to its bones. That night, as the revelry continued, Lyra stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city. The moon hung full and white above the rooftops. Aaron joined her quietly. You should be celebrating, he said. I don't dance well, she replied. Besides, I like this view better. He looked out with her, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. When I disappeared, I thought the kingdom would die without me. I was wrong. It lived because people like you refused to give up. She glanced at him. You really mean that? He nodded. You showed me what it means to be a king. Her lips curved faintly. And what did you show me? He stepped closer, their shoulders brushing. That even wolves can fall in love. For the first time, she didn't turn away. The moonlight caught her eyes as she whispered, then let the world howl. And when his lips met hers, it was not the end of war, but the beginning of a legend, a story that would be told for generations of how the king and his warrior queen rebuilt a realm not with fear, but with fire. It began again at dawn. Peace had lasted less than a month before whispers of rebellion stirred in the farthest reaches of the north. Former lords loyal to Valmore had gathered their remnants, calling themselves the Serpent's Shadow. They struck villages, ambushed caravans, spreading fear like smoke. Lyra found Aaron in the war council chamber, standing before a map marked with crimson pins. "They've taken Wintermere," she said grimly. "They're moving fast." He nodded. "I expected as much. Power leaves a vacuum. Someone always crawls out to fill it." She slammed her hand against the table. "Then we crush them before they grow." He looked at her, and there it was again, the fire that had first drawn him in. "You'll lead the strike." "I'll lead the wolves," she said. "They're my people." Aaron smiled faintly. "I wouldn't dream of stopping you." 3 days later, the army marched north again, smaller this time but faster, deadlier. Lyra rode at its head, her armor gleaming beneath the cold morning light. Aaron rode behind her with the royal guard, unwilling to let her go alone despite her protests. When they reached Wintermere, they found it in flames. The serpent banners hung from broken walls, the enemy already waiting. Lyra drew her sword. No mercy. The battle was brutal, fought through streets choked with ash and smoke. The wolves fought like spirits of vengeance, and Lyra was their storm. Aaron stayed close, cutting down any who came near her flank. When at last the serpent standard fell, the survivors dropped their weapons. The leader, a scarred old lord, knelt before them, trembling. "We were promised power," he gasped. "We thought the serpent lived." Lyra raised her sword, but Aaron caught her hand. "Enough. Let them carry the truth home." She hesitated, then lowered her blade. "You're too kind." He smiled. "You're kind enough for both of us." By nightfall, the fires had died. The people of Wintermere gathered in the streets, cheering the return of the crown and the wolves. Aaron stood beside Lyra, their armor bloodstained but unbroken. "It's done," he said softly. "For now," she replied. He looked at her, eyes bright beneath the fading light. "You once told me mercy was a luxury. Maybe now it's a strength." She smirked. "Don't get soft on me, King." "Wouldn't dare." As the northern lights shimmered across the sky, they stood together, rulers not just by blood but by bond. The war had made them legends, but it was their love and their unity that would make them eternal. For in that moment, as the wolves howled across the frozen hills, the kingdom finally knew peace earned not by crown or sword, but by the hearts that refused to bow. The days after the battle for Wintermere passed like a breath held too long. Snow fell thick over the ruined stronghold, softening the scars of war. The fires were extinguished, the wounded were tended to, and the cries of grief turned to murmurs of rebuilding. Lyra stood on the balcony of the fortress's great hall, her gaze sweeping over the frozen valley below. The air was sharp, her breath a white ghost in the cold. Below her, children played in the snow where the fighting had raged days before. She closed her eyes, letting the wind sting her face. For the first time in months, the sound she heard was not steel but laughter. A door creaked behind her. Aaron's footsteps approached, steady and quiet. "You should be resting," he said softly. She turned, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You always say that. I don't think either of us remembers how." He leaned against the railing beside her. His cloak was heavy with snow, his hair tousled by the wind. "The kingdom's calm again, for now. The council pledges loyalty. The people sing your name more than mine." She laughed lightly. "Because I'm louder. Because you're braver," he said. She gave him a look. "You're flattering me again, Your Majesty." He tilted his head, his smile fading into something more thoughtful. "You've earned it. You turned rebellion into unity. You turned fear into fire." Lyra turned back to the view. "It's not over. It never really is. Something always grows from the ashes." He nodded. "Then we'll burn it again, together." They stood in silence for a long time, the wind whispering between them. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "Do you ever wonder if it was worth it?" Aaron frowned. "What do you mean?" "All of this," she said, gesturing toward the valley, the soldiers, the castle rebuilt from ruin. All the death, the blood, the loss. We've won, but it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like survival. He looked out with her. Maybe survival is victory. Maybe it always was. Lyra sighed. Then we've won 1,000 times already. He smiled faintly. Then may we never stop winning. By nightfall, Ridgefall's army had begun its long march home. The survivors carried the wolf banners proudly, their howls echoing across the frozen fields. The kingdom was whole again, united under one rule, one banner, but not one crown. When they returned to Silver Moon, the capital was transformed. No longer the city of shadows and serpents, it shone bright under new banners of gold and silver. The people lined the streets to welcome them, chanting the names of their king and the warrior queen. As they rode through the gates, Lyra felt the weight of it, the gratitude, the hope, the endless eyes watching her. For once, no one whispered her name in mockery. No one laughed at her scar. They shouted it like a promise. Stormbane, Stormbane, Stormbane. She glanced at Aaron beside her. His expression was unreadable, pride, exhaustion, relief all tangled into one. When their eyes met, he reached out and brushed his gloved fingers against hers for just a heartbeat. It was enough. Inside the palace, the great hall had been remade. The serpent banners were gone, replaced with the crest of the wolf and the crown intertwined. The throne sat gleaming beneath the morning light. The court gathered, the nobles kneeling as Aaron and Lyra entered. But when they rose, Aaron lifted a hand. "There will be no crowns today," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "No ceremonies, no gilded lies. The kingdom was not won by gold or bloodline, it was rebuilt by those who fought for each other." He turned to Lyra. "And it is time we honored that." He reached for a small circlet crafted from winterwood and silver, simple and beautiful. Lyra blinked. "Aaron." He stepped closer. "Lyra Stormbane, daughter of the North, savior of the realm, you have no equal in courage or loyalty. You stood where kings fell and fought where armies fled. You are the heart of this kingdom." She shook her head slightly. "You don't need to do this." "I don't need to," he said quietly. "I want to." Then, before the court, the king knelt. The hall gasped. Aaron lifted the circlet and placed it in her hands. "You once told me you didn't want a crown. So here is one not of gold, but of the people's faith. Wear it, not as queen above me, but as queen beside me." The hall fell silent. Lyra stared down at him, her throat tight. Then slowly, she lifted the circlet and placed it on her head. "If I rule, it will be with you. Not behind you, not beneath you. With you." Aaron rose, his eyes shining. "Then the realm has found its heart again." The hall erupted in cheers. "Long live the warrior queen," the chant echoed until it shook the palace walls. Aaron reached for her hand, and for the first time, Lyra let him hold it openly. Together, they stood before the throne not as rulers and subject, not as legend and savior, but as equals bound by the same fire that had carried them through darkness. Later that night, the celebrations spilled into the streets. Musicians played in every square, and children danced around bonfires. Lyra slipped away from the palace balcony to find Aaron standing beneath the stars, looking out over the glowing city. "You're supposed to be feasting," she teased. He turned, smiling. "I thought you didn't like parties." "I don't," she said, joining him. "But I like quiet." He studied her for a long moment. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Beyond tomorrow?" She shrugged. "Maybe peace. Maybe rebuilding. Maybe just breathing." Aaron laughed softly. "You sound like someone who's earned it." She leaned on the railing beside him, her eyes tracing the stars. "We've both earned it. You especially." He looked down at the city. "You know, when I first took the crown, I thought being king meant control, command, obedience, fear. But now I understand it's something else entirely." "What is it then?" "Service," he said simply. "And trust. You taught me that." She turned her head, meeting his gaze. "Then I'll keep teaching you, as long as you're willing to learn." He smiled. "Always." The silence that followed was warm, easy. The world outside could have vanished, and neither would have noticed. Then Lyra said softly, "Do you ever miss who you were before all this?" Erin's smile faded slightly. "Sometimes. The man who could walk among strangers without being bowed to. The soldier who was allowed to bleed and be forgotten." She nodded. "I miss her too, the girl who thought scars made her unworthy." He touched her cheek gently. "Scars make us real." Her breath caught. "Do you believe that?" "I believe you're proof of it." And before she could speak again, he kissed her, slow, steady, not with the hunger of war, but with the quiet certainty of peace. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will come too soon." He smiled faintly. "Then let's face it together, as always." They stood there until the first light touched the rooftops, the kingdom sleeping beneath them, the world finally still. The dawn of the new age came quietly, without fanfare, just the slow blooming of light across the horizon. The war was over, but the kingdom's wounds still ran deep. Villages had to be rebuilt, families reunited, promises kept. Lyra and Erin ruled not from the throne but from the road. They traveled from one province to the next, not as monarchs surrounded by guards, but as warriors turned shepherds of peace. They listened to the people, worked beside them, and reminded them that the crown was no longer a symbol of distance but of unity. Wherever they went, the legend of the Wolf King and the Warrior Queen grew. Songs spread of their battles, their courage, and the love that had saved a realm built on ashes. Children played at being Lyra and Erin, wielding sticks like swords, shouting, "For the North," until their mothers laughed. But behind the songs and smiles, Lyra and Erin knew the truth: peace was fragile, a flame that needed guarding. One evening, they returned to Ridgefall. The fortress stood stronger than ever, its towers gleaming in the sunset. The people gathered in the courtyard to greet them, throwing flowers at their feet. A child ran forward, a little girl with wide eyes and tangled hair. "My queen," she said shyly, "is it true you fought the serpent all by yourself?" Lyra knelt, smiling. "No. I had help." "From the king?" the girl asked. Lyra nodded. "From him and from every person who refused to bow to fear." The girl grinned. "Then maybe I'll fight like you one day." Lyra's smile deepened. "I hope you never have to. But if you do, fight for love, not for war." As the girl ran off, Erin approached. "You're better at this than I am." "Because they don't expect kings to be kind," she said. He looked at her, half smiling. "Then it's a good thing I stopped being just a king." That night, a celebration filled Ridgefall once more, this time not of war, but of life. Music echoed through the halls, laughter spilling into the winter air. Lyra and Erin danced among their people, not as rulers, but as family. Later, when the fires dimmed and the stars stretched endless above them, they slipped away to the highest tower. From there, they could see the whole kingdom, the forests, the rivers, the mountains that had once been battlegrounds now glowing silver beneath the moon. Lyra leaned against the parapet, her voice soft. "Do you think it'll last?" Erin joined her, his gaze distant. "Peace never lasts. But it's worth fighting for anyway." She smiled. "Then we keep fighting. Until the wolves sleep," he said. They stood there as the wind carried the scent of pine and snow, the sounds of celebration faint below. Lyra turned to him. "Do you ever wonder what they'll say about us?" He looked at her, his eyes warm. "They'll say we were stubborn, reckless, that we loved too fiercely and fought too hard. And that somehow, it was enough." The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the world gold. Lyra reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. "Then let them say it," she whispered. He smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "Let them. We'll be too busy living it." As the sun rose over the mountains, its light spilling across the kingdom, two shadows stood against it, side by side, unbroken, eternal. The wolves had risen. The realm was whole. And peace, for the first time in a lifetime, truly belonged to them. The Alpha King's throne has been reclaimed. The Warrior Queen's name now echoes through legend. But peace, like dawn, never lasts forever. If you've walked with Lyra and Erin through battle, betrayal, and love, Then don't stop now. The next chapter of their legend is only beginning. Subscribe, like, and turn on the bell, so you don't miss the next story where kingdoms rise, hearts burn, and wolves still howl for more. Comment below. What moment made your heart race the most? Your answer might shape the next tale.